This is K-Pop Sunday, brought to you by your K-Pop Sunbaes before you have to go back to work on Monday. We are your hosts, OldR,
Serin,
Min,
and JR.
Hi, and welcome back to our podcast. Today we're diving into the first part of our two-part mini-series on the 2014 survival show that birthed Starship Entertainment's Monsta X, No.Mercy. Around that time, survival shows were popping off. YG had two with late 2013's Win, Who Is Next, which gave birth to Winner, and then a year later, in 2014, with Mix and Match, which gave birth to Icon. After the end of No.Mercy, JYP Entertainment would have their own show entitled 16 and gave birth to Twice. Another interesting note is that all of these shows aired on the same channel, Mnet. Of course, these shows are not the first of this genre to exist, but even newer K-pop fans would know these groups mentioned above. Since No.Mercy is turning 10 years old in December this year, we thought it would be a good time to do a retrospective on the show. Today's show will look into the first 5 episodes, and the next one will look at the last 5 episodes. It should also go without saying, but major spoilers ahead. So now, without further ado, let's get into it.
Before talking about the episodes themselves, we'll talk a little bit about the show's build-up. Prior to its release, press releases dropped about the show's upcoming premiere. On November 11th and 12th, articles started pouring out telling the public about the format of the show, mission-based survival, how many episodes it would be, 10 episodes for 10 weeks, and who the celebrity judges would be, various Starship artists and big industry producers, writers, singers, etc. These celebrities consisted of K-Will, Sistar members Hyorin and Soyu, Junggigo, Gain, Reimer, and a handful of others. Via an X Sports news article, the show's PD said, quote, "Unlike existing survival programs, we will present a new form of survival where the trainees will collaborate with top artists and put on a special stage. You will be completely immersed in the skills and charms of the 12 trainees who will be shown through the collaboration stage with special stars." Unquote. This will be important later on, so keep it in mind. Articles had comments from netizens showing their excitement, and it only continued to grow as the announcement of K-Will, Hyorin, and Soyu's participation was announced, and, of course, as more teasers were released. On December 8th, a couple days before the show's premiere, a press conference was held. Those present included PD Il-Yuil, PD Choi Sung-jun, K-Will, who was attending as the head of the agency, quote-unquote, Hyorin, Soyu, and Junggigo. The trainees also made an appearance. There were tons of photos from this event. I think I looked through like 600 photos. So I have a few linked here, but I have a master list doc of, I have a master list doc of everything else. One article said that the show would be quote-unquote stronger than Win, Who's Next, and Mix and Match. So in other words, more brutal and cruel. And as I've seen all 3 of these shows, I don't necessarily think this was the case, but that's a conversation for another day. But now that we have some baseline information out of the way, let's meet the trainees.
So 12 trainees participated in No.Mercy. We will divide them into the vocals and the rappers and discuss their backgrounds as is relevant to the episodes. The vocals were Shonu, Wonho, Hyungwon, Mingyun, Minhyuk, Gihyun, Yusu, and Seokwan. The rappers were Kwangji, Juhon, Shapgun, and Yunho. So let's go on to the episode description. The first episode aired on December 10th, 2014. This episode is obviously establishing the baseline for the rest of the show. The trainees and their positions are introduced, and the production team gives them the rankings. The trainees are evaluated by their positions of skill, i.e., rapper, vocal, dance, etc., in the first mission where they each performed for the judges. The rest of this episode focuses on Shonu and Juhon. This also lines up with the articles that were released for this episode. They mainly focused on Shonu and the long time he has spent as a trainee. The initial rankings were from 1st to 12th, Shonu, Juhon, Kwangji, Wonho, Yunho, Mingyun, Shapgun, Gihyun, Hyungwon, Minhyun, Seokwan, and Yusu.
Honestly, for being the first episode of this show, I felt like it was not the greatest look into the show. Like, It didn't really set up enough of a storyline to be like, wow, I really want to watch what next. I was just sitting there being like, I don't know what's going on. Why should I feel the emotions you're trying to make me feel with no background for any of this? Huh? I was very confused.
Yeah. Because, like we said, it was very Shonu heavy, and it's obvious that Starship wanted to push him at the time, but it meant that there wasn't a lot of time for other trainees. Minus Juhan, who is also an obvious favorite. So the training and the mission prep was super minimal, and we were given 2 trainees to focus on. So you're just kind of watching it and you're like, oh, okay, Shonu is friends with members of GOT7. That's great. He's been a trainee for a long time. That's great. I guess.
Good for him.
Good for him. It didn't do a good job of connecting the audience with the trainees.
Agreed. I also felt like the episode was too focused on Shonu. It almost felt like the producers had an extreme bias right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could have divided the screen time more equally and introduced like at least 6 trainees on the first episode and the rest of the 6 on the second. Or they could have just done full introduction of all 12 members on the first episode alone.
Right. Which makes me wonder, I don't remember like official rankings of Monsta X, but is Shonu the face of the group? Is that maybe why he was pushed so heavily this first episode?
That was what I assumed.
Mm-hmm. Let me double check and see.
I mean, he did have that brief stint as a backup dancer for Ihyori.
Right.
Yeah.
Which the show mentioned.
And he still brings it up to this day. So I think he was definitely the attention grabber for the group because he had the most quote-unquote career among the trainees pre-debut.
So I'm seeing he is the leader, main dancer, and lead vocalist. I'm not seeing a face of the group as a role.
But before the group debuted and when they were doing this show, could that have been where Starship was thinking he was going to be, not knowing who all would end up in the group?
Right.
Could be.
That's very likely what happened.
Things did not go as planned for them. Well, so we think.
Right. Okay, so the final rankings for episode 1 after the first quote-unquote mission, in order from 1st to 12th place, was Juhan, Shonu, Shapgan, Kihyun, Kwangji, Yunho, Hyungwon, Yusu, Mingyun, Wonho, Minhyuk, and Seokwan. Since it was the first mission, there were no eliminations.
It felt kind of weird of them to change the rankings this early on and having pre-established rankings and then changing it immediately. It felt a little...
Yeah.
It was a little odd as a viewer, but I guess it was the... Let's push, we're so hardcore and mean. Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's jump over to episode 2. The second episode aired a week later on December 17th, 2014. The beginning focuses on comments from netizens and the press that the show was getting at the time. A section that was highlighted was the quote-unquote visual line, aka Wonho, Minhyuk, and Hyungwon. Articles would also be released about their visuals, including a handful about Hyungwon's modeling career. The bulk of the episode is finishing off the performances that had started in the previous episode. Something of mention here is that an article was released discussing the reviews that the show was getting online. Some people found it too similar to YG's Mix and Match, specifically the missions aspect. But Starship released a statement saying as the show goes on, it will differentiate itself from the YG shows. In our opinion, that's pretty dumb, because all of these shows do missions to find the cream of the crop, and all of these shows were aired on the same network. You can't really get that far on the same concept.
Yeah, all these debut shows pretty much follow the same MO.
It's really hard to create a new type of mission anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like all of the Idol, American Idol, and The Voice, and X Factor. It's all the same thing. We do love it though. It's all the same thing. Anyway. Another big thing that dropped this episode was the realization that Shotgun is the cousin of Sung Minho, who is a member of Winner. Famous cousins. Wow. Amazing. Who would have thunk? This would also be mentioned again later throughout the episodes. And that's basically episode 2.
In general, I think they did a much better job of balancing the trainees and their screen time in this episode, though, of course, they were still more heavily handed with some than others. But, of course, there's always going to be favorites in these shows. There's always going to be someone that the producers and the companies want to push even more than others. So,
yeah,
it is what it is. As far as the performances go, Wonho's was the most amusing because his attempt to be sexy, his song choice was Bad Girl by Bumki, was completely blocked by his wardrobe choices. He had like a giant sweater and suit jacket on, and his when he tried to show his abs, like his coat just completely covered everything. So he kind of got knocked for that by the judges, which was amusing. But I think it just goes to show that stage presence can be improved upon, and it's not like an inherent thing that these people know. They have to work on it, because obviously Wonho eventually figured out the sexy thing, and he's utilized it quite a bit since. So there's that.
I love Wonho's arc. He has always been a little bit of a himbo, and he has just encapsulated that in the best ways possible. We love that for him.
He's perfected it for sure.
Yes.
Well, I'll be honest, most of the performances felt underwhelming. Don't come after me, Monsta X fans, but I have to say it. The only performance that actually grabbed my attention from this episode, I think, was Ki-hyun singing Hea, or Easy Fuera Ea by Jonghyun. It was probably the only one that left enough impact for me to remember. Like, all the other ones didn't feel like it had enough impact.
Yeah.
It's probably got to do with them being trainees, and that means they have little to no stage experience, but they truly left a lot. I mean a lot of space to improve. And honestly, the judges' reviews and the rankings for this episode, there were no surprise. Ki-hyun definitely deserved that climbing up. And I guess the more mediocre performances got low rankings because they were mediocre.
Right. Yeah, I feel like the judging was pretty good overall.
Also, Hyorin looked so pretty.
Yes.
Hyorin is so pretty, and she was so pretty in this. That was all I could focus on. Whenever the judges were up, I was like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty.
What I did learn from this episode, it's a minor spoiler alert, so like some of the other episodes also did remind me of that, but it taught me how important it is for you to know what looks good on you and what sounds good for you. I think a lot of the song choices were missed.
Definitely.
Yeah, that was kind of a trend in this show.
So the new rankings will be updated once all the performances for the second mission were completed.
Meaning that there were no updates for episode 2.
Honestly, they should have just waited until like episode 3. So like we could get like a baseline of all of them and then have the soul-shattering rankings happen. But alas, the storytelling is not for everyone.
It was really choppy. Speaking of OldR, I don't know if you wanted to interject anywhere in there.
No, I just love the Wonho jacket debacle.
Yeah.
The man has learned his lesson. It reminded me very much of one of the early performances of HOT's Outside Castle. Hee-jun had these pink braids and like kind of mesh mask, and you could see from the first moves he regretted his choice. And that was the same sort of look on his face that Wonho had. It just kind of cracked me up. Because obviously the man learned a lesson. It was don't trust the stylists.
Yeah. On to the next one. Episode 3 aired on December 24th. Mingyun and Yusu are the ones that are focused on this time around, the thread being that they have somewhat of a rivalry. The mission for this episode is that rappers and vocalists will be paired together, and then 2 trainees, one from each role, will be up for elimination. The trainees don't get to choose these pairs either, to make a note of that. Finally, this episode puts forward a prize for 2 of the winners. Again, 1 rapper, 1 vocalist. Hyorin and Sani will release a song with one of the winners, and Soyu and Giriboy will release a song with the other winner.
Because they don't announce who wins this episode. It's next episode that they're like...
Right.
Yeah. Again, I am not smart enough to keep track of these episodes.
I have to add just one thing. That performance by Shonu and Ki-hyun was messy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. That's my biggest thing with this episode, was that, as we've been saying, even the previous 2 episodes, the formatting was really bad, but this episode in particular, it was just so apparent, and it shows how difficult the show is to watch. They will have a ton of backstory and show only a few performances. In fact, if I'm correct, I think Shonu and Ki-hyun are the only ones that actually perform in this episode, which is crazy because they're like an hour long. So you're just sitting there watching people like talk and like practice, and then at the end you see one performance. Like we mentioned the PDs at the beginning of the episode, so they were the ones that did it.
It's very exhausting.
And even when they try to give backstory and like set up a narrative arc for the trainees, it is the most unimpactful stuff ever. Like, you don't sit there being like, oh yeah, this is a story I resonate with, or like, this looks like a friendship, or these people are feuding and something. It feels very empty. It feels like they were trying to make a plot line happen in post,
forced.
and then, and then there's just nothing. So it's very hard to be left with anything concrete after we've seen the show to be like, oh yeah, I like that, or that was interesting. It's like, okay, we watched an hour of something. We watched something. And that's about it. And it's such a shame.
I also wanted to add that for the Shonu and Ki-hyun performance, it was messy not just because their performance itself was lacking, but also because of the song choice. I think JR and I both pointed that out because the song they performed was Bang Bang by...
Yeah, that's right.
It's like Ariana
Bang
Grande,
Bang by
Jessie
J,
and...
Ariana Grande, and Nicki Minaj.
Yeah, so it doesn't really fit them.
Who in the world would sing Bang Bang for an audition show like this?
Yeah.
2 guys, 2 men. Singing.
Which, like, they probably could have done it.
Yeah, like, they probably thought they could pull it off because they're sexy and all, but no.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
It definitely doesn't translate that well into big masculinity energy. And honestly, like, if they did something like, I don't know, Nice and Slow by Usher, or something more male specific, so to say, something that was sung by a man and sung in the perspective of a man, I think they could interpret that a lot more naturally.
That was necessarily the problem. I think that the styling was an issue, the arrangement was an issue, and I think it's also because I think it was one of those things where it was like Shonu just really liked the song, and so he wanted to perform it, and that does not work.
Liking it and performing it well are two different things.
Right.
It definitely shows that you do need like a lot of background knowledge on the song choice, on the songs you want to perform.
Right. And I misspoke. Ki-hyun was the one that picked it.
It feels like he just went with that song because it was popular and he knew that song.
Yeah. It's also amazing that they managed to get the rights for it, because if you're doing covers,
True.
At least then you need to license it for covers.
True. Right. So
that must have been expensive. That's probably why that was the only performance of the episode. It spent a full budget on the licensing.
Yeah. So needless to say, that performance was not like well received by the judges, and Shonu was the one that was up for elimination of the duo. So there's that. OldR, anything?
Yeah, nothing else. You guys said it.
Okay, great.
I agree.
Yeah.
My voice can't, but I do agree.
Yeah, so OldR, at the time of this recording, was feeling a little bit under the weather, so please Please
That's
understand.
putting it mildly.
Our last 4 episodes, all of us are just sick, relaying
Yep.
being sick.
It's
Good
getting
times.
closer to winter time anyway.
Which is hilarious because we have never met in person, yet somehow
We always
Don't
get
do
Being
sick.
ill
You're
just
right.
got
We
sent
always
out.
get sick at the same time.
Yeah.
it always feels like
So
a relay
funny.
system, though. It really does, where it's like, okay, I'm better. I'm passing off the baton. Your turn.
Yeah.
We do that, and that's just wild.
Shall we move on to episode 4?
Yes, but just to say, no new ranks, because again, this mission is not done. They really spread it over 3 episodes. So, let's talk about episode 4.
For most of the part of episode 4, aired on December 31st, focused on the performances, particularly the pairings of Minhyuk and Seogwon, Juwon and Shapgun, and Kwangji and Yuno. So from those 3 pairs, the trainees up for elimination were Seogwon, Shapgun, and Kwangji.
Not a lot of things happened. Not a lot of things happened in these episodes.
Because
So-
they dragged too much on the behind the scenes of how the performance came together.
Yeah.
That part didn't have to be that long.
Mm-hmm.
No. Because it's very obvious that all of the performances were filmed at the same day.
Right.
Mhm.
So it feels like they had too much content for a single episode, or they just did not have enough content to really fill out, when you're making a TV show, you usually get, an allotted set of episodes that you have to fill. And it feels like they just didn't have enough proper content to fill those episodes.
Mhm.
So they were like, okay, we're just gonna split it up. Because, I know that other shows do the thing where they show in episode 1 show a lot of the performances and then continue on in the next episode.
Mhm.
I don't mind that in many other shows. It's just very jarring in this one.
Yeah.
They're not very good at that.
It's funny because, like you said, it was like they either had too much content for a mission or not enough. And by the end of the show, in particular, we'll talk about this more in episode 10. Episode 10 felt incredibly rushed. And it was like, okay, so the first 5 episodes are a mess formatting-wise. And you rush the final episode? You couldn't have split it up a little bit better so that there's less mess prior to the very last episode that has to have, the most heart and the most important, parts, because they're announcing the group. So
Yeah.
it's kind of disappointing.
Mhm.
But, as far as this episode goes, the best performance, in my opinion, was Minhyuk and Seogwon's cover of Eddie Kim's The Manual. They were really free on the stage, they played off of each other well, and it was nice to see them do so well together because earlier in this episode, they were talking about how they were concerned about their pairing because they didn't have matching music styles. And I think it just goes to show that teamwork really can shine even if you don't necessarily think the pairing will go well, So I
Right.
think they came to a good compromise.
I just gotta say, that song they cover, The Manual, that definitely didn't age well.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize the lyrics were like that, I think, until this episode.
Yeah, because
So.
the reason we're reacting like this is because I gave them the rundown, but brief summary. So the original singer, Eddie Kim, is one of the people that were implicated in the Burning Sun scandal. So I just gotta add the Korean title of the manual would literally be translated to How to Use You.
Yeah.
We love men.
It, how manipulating someone, how do you use a person? In the Korean context, you will get the imagery, but when you translate that into English, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Because you hear the manual and you're like, oh, a manual on how to be a good boyfriend? No, not really.
Yeah. But if you hear the Korean title, How to Use You, it just feels like subject is kind of shifting.
Yes,
And
exactly.
the focus is more on the male protagonist maneuvering his girlfriend the way how he wants to act out his romance. So, yeah. Anyway, this round, I think it was definitely a day for the underdogs, i.e. Minhyuk and Seokwan. Like, because honestly, Kihyun had his breakthrough with Jonghyun cover on episode 2. And Shunwoo was obviously the show's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And that pairing could have been out of this world. But with that song choice and with that performance, well, their chemistry and performance all overall, it wasn't as good as expected. But we didn't have much expectation for Minhyuk and Seokwan because they clearly said at the beginning that they have very different vocal styles, different preferences. So we didn't know how they would weave those two different concepts into one. But they pulled it off very well. I think they found a really good compromise in the middle. And yeah, this episode was definitely a good message to all the future trainees out there, telling you about how important teamwork is, how important it is to find something that could work in favor of both or every person. Side note, but did anyone else think that the Chuhan and Shotgun pairing was unfair?
Yeah. Like, I think that there was a lot of pitting of them against each other.
Yeah, they had to choose the top two, the more... They had to choose the more quote-unquote talented rappers of the 4. Put them together. And the 2 relatively underperforming rappers together. And
yeah.
They were trying really hard to be mean, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it just...
Yeah.
In this episode, there were no updated rankings, but the winner of the Sunny and Hyorin collab is revealed to be Juhan, a song called Coach Me, released on January 2nd to great rankings on the music charts. One article described his rap as very witty, dense, and raw, so it was very well received. Something else that was kind of amusing that was written by MBN, they said, quote, "However, the response was not as good as expected, compared to the existing survival program shows, such as Winner TV or Mix and Match. It is a time when it should be gathering attention and gradually forming a fandom as the episodes goes on, but the response from viewers is lukewarm," unquote. Essentially boiling down to the song is bigger than the show, and from our comments of the show, it might not be very strange.
Yeah, I thought that was a really funny... The article kind of went even farther into that, but I just thought that was hilarious.
Well, if the show claims to be mean, it shall have to just deal with mean reviews back.
The final episode, which aired on January 7th, 2015, which I believe was the first episode in the new year. Yes, it was the first episode in the new year. The 5th episode mainly focused on the final 2 duo performances, Wonho and Hyungwon, and the second pair, Yusu and Mingyun, as well as the first 2 eliminations. Yes, it took 5 episodes to eliminate any trainees. Again, poor pacing. So, right off the bat, the first 2 eliminations are rapper Kwangji and vocal Yusu. The trainees all cry and talk together, and the 2 eliminated trainees clean up their spaces in the dorm and leave the company for good. In the next episode, we will have a mini Where Are They Now segment, so we'll talk about what they have been up to since then. Finally, Kihyun is announced as the second trainee to have an artist collab, this time the one with Soyu and Giriboy. A problem that, again, creeps up in the formatting of this show is that when you only show a couple of performances per episode, you may end up putting 2 bad performances next to each other. So, Wonho and Hyungwon's stage performing Sexy Back was way over-rehearsed, and they struggled to have, command of the stage, in my opinion. And then Yusu and Mingyun's performance of Replay by SHINee was super lackluster and was not a good show of their skills. So, coupled with that, there's just so much nothing content and not a lot of payoff to the things that they do show, and you just end up not connecting with the trainees. So the emotional moments don't really hit. Did I really care that Yusu and Gwangji were eliminated? Not really.
No.
Yeah, it was disappointing.
I think this is definitely where show's timing issues came to light. in the bad way, because they dragged on too much with the missions, and then they had to splice up the progress into 2 or 3 episodes. They didn't give enough background information on each of the trainees, and when that's the moment where we get to know more about them and kind of bond over them, they could have probably had like a potential fandom that could have supported each trainee as the missions proceeded. It feels like they tried to market themselves as a completely different kind of audition show / group formation show, and it just backfired miserably.
Yeah.
And also, my biggest question is, were these performances released in sequence of their performance time? So the first pair that were shown were Chun and Kia. So were they the first team to perform, and were the rest of them performing in that order? Because it feels like that sequence could have been kind of manipulated by the producers and released in whatever order they wanted to put out, just to make it like more suspenseful or more impactful, as to highlight some of the good performances and just ignore the bad ones. That didn't feel natural to me.
I have a lot of opinions in the second half of the series, because the first 5 episodes to me, and as we've already said this a billion times, so that's why I didn't feel like bringing it up again, was just that the pacing and the focus was a huge mess. Now, this is not the only show who suffered from it. Like, the Producer 101s have been criticized for it as well, and we know that a lot of times they will film, like, targeting specific idols that they get screen time for, because they expect them to pass it off to the end, which is what I felt like they did with here. But you need to have some attachment to even like the lowest ranking idols, because when they get eliminated, it needs to hit hard. It needs to feel like there are consequences and your fave might be next. And I don't feel like they really delivered that in the first half. Second half, after they more established who was who and you got attached to them, then they really hit their stride and they really focused their episodes. But they were just, I don't know, JR, I haven't seen anything about us, but did you find any information about how they decided how to do the episodes? Such as, did they come in and say, okay, we need to break this group of performances down for multiple episodes, or was it just a timing thing when they went to the editing room? Like, was there anything said about that? Because that is the part that always interested me. Like, was this just a mess, or was this just a very stupid plan?
So if I remember correctly, the only time that the PDs spoke was at the press conference, and they really didn't go into the formulation of the show. So,
boo. That was the what part I was most interested in.
Yep.
I would like to know that there was a thought.
And to give Produce some credit, this is its downfall and also what helps. The episodes for Produce are long. They are so long. That's probably the only reason we haven't done an episode on those shows, because there's like 4 seasons.
Because they're fascinating.
And but there's 4 seasons, and each episode in like 12 episodes per season are 2 to 3 hours long. So you see a ton of content about individual trainees and also group relations between the trainees, and because you have all that time, it's a lot easier to get a connection to them. So in an hour, if it's better done, you probably could get a better connection than No.Mercy did, but as we've continually said, they were really bad at it. So,
well, I also think that No.Mercy there were times where the focus wasn't good. Like, I totally understood when they were, like, showing, like, show news background with JYP, and when they would show, like, members going to school or talking with their family. Get that. But then some of the interactions were just, like, we don't need this. This feels like a filler. Like that one, there was one section where they were trying to show off the friendship between the members, and that was that really uncomfortable scene where they showed 2 of the members taking a shower who were underage at the time. And it's like, who decided that this should be a thing? This is insane.
It was very, very strange. So to wrap up the 5th episode, I'll give the final ranking for the second mission as follows from 1st to 10th place. And that is Juhan, Shapgun, Kihyun, Seokwan, Minhyuk, Hyungwon, Mingyun, Shonu, Wonho, and Yoonho.
This brings us to the end of part 1 of our retrospective on No.Mercy. Overall, our collective opinions up to this point are that the episodes are too short and that they don't balance the content out well. Some interesting things do happen in the second half of the show, so be sure to tune in to our next episode to hear our final thoughts.
Before ending this episode, we want to take a moment to give an update about how the next year will look for the K-Pop Sundae podcast. 2024 has brought with it many changes for each of us, and we've come to the realization that the way we've been making episodes for the past 5 years is no longer feasible for our current lifestyles. This doesn't mean that this is the end of our show, but rather a new beginning. 2025 will look a bit different. While we take the time to work on Season 6, which will likely release in 2026, we will be releasing monthly Single Scoop episodes in the meantime. As many of you know, Single Scoops is our mini podcast that typically releases in the first half of the year before the main season drops, and also occasionally for holidays and the like. Because these are low research content formats, it's much easier to write, edit, and ultimately release, meaning we can take our time to produce better quality content possible for the main show. In Single Scoops, we talk about Korean movies and shows, niche K-pop content, and whatever we find interesting, but it might be a bit too short for a full episode. If you have any recommendations for topics, let us know. Now, let's end the episode.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, then please make sure to rate, subscribe, follow, and tell your friends about us. If you want to interact with us or just see more of our content, then you can follow the links in the description to our website, social media platforms, and Ko-fi. Also, don't forget that our next episode comes out on November 24th, 2024. Thanks everyone. Bye!
Bye!
다음에 봐요.
안녕!